Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. My name is Sulaiman Rabat. So last week we kind of did an overview of what's happening on the political scene here in South Africa. We spoke about the dynamics within the DA. That was the big story last week, with John Steenhuisen indicating that he was not going to stand for a third term as the leader of the DA. We unpacked that in detail. We looked at about what's happening in the EFF with Malema and the court case and the ruling there. The ANC, the dynamics, you're starting to see indications of the succession battle start going, coming to the fore slowly but surely within the ANC. And then we spoke also about the MK. Since then, Zuma has brought his son, Duduzane, into the equation, with Duduzile kind of fading away into the background because of the multiple controversies that she has been involved in. Now, this week is Sona Week, and that's what we're going to be focusing on for this program. Our guest, professor and political analyst at the University of the Northwest, Andre Duvanaga. Very good day to you, Prof, and welcome to the program.
Good day, Suleiman. Nice talking to you again.
Look, I mean, SONA is not a new phenomenon. It's been there. People know what it stands for, State of the Nation Address. But considering the political climate that we are in, and considering the political mood and temperature of the average South African, what does SONA mean to them in 2026?
Well, I'm afraid to say, under the leadership of specifically our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, it is for me as if something got lost somewhere with regard to the state of the nation. It is as if the impact of the state of the nation is not what it used to be. And it has a lot to do with the profile of Mr. Ramaphosa. In short, people doesn't believe him. If he say A, B, and C, they say, so what? And I was asked the question a time ago, will I listen to the state of the nation? And my answer was, only because I have to report on media about the content. If I was an ordinary citizen, I would be just happy that the media inform me accordingly. And it has a lot to do with the president. But the point you are making is also a valid point. At the moment, South Africa is standing at the crossroads. And there's a lot of dynamics internationally, nationally, and at the local level that is playing itself out. What is making this State of the Nation address a very important one, I believe.
So basically, Prof, the ordinary South African, it's not that they don't care, it's just that they don't have much hope that irrespective what the president says in the State of the Nation address, that will make a difference.
Well, a time ago, our same president told us about this super city in China that they developed over there, that he's going to bring it to South Africa, and we will develop it over here. I had a debate with a futurologist for about an hour, and my basic argument was we cannot even maintain our current metros and local structures. How are we going to build a super city? That is just not working. So the problem the people do not believe, the answers the president is providing just don't go all the way. If the president will tell us on Thursday he's going to arrest 100 ANC people for corruption or nepotism, and we make a survey after that, I believe that 80 to 90% won't believe him that there will really be any action in this regard. So this is the problem. A lot of talk, but he doesn't walk the road.
I suppose it was at SONA, right, back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, that he kind of inspired confidence I remember that year. Zuma was supposed to deliver the SONA, and then it got delayed because of the internal shenanigans within the ANC where they were trying to force him to step down, and Ramaphosa, who was the newly elected leader of the ANC, to succeed him. Eventually, was it a week later, the SONA took place, and he introduced the concept of Tuma Mina. And there was this kind of what was later on termed Ramaphoria. Everyone was excited. He's a bit of a better speaker than Zuma when reading off his script, although one could argue that informally Zuma's much more charismatic. And people felt, okay, this is the kind of president that we needed. And that SONA, that year, 2018, seemed to really inspire a lot of confidence. Where did it go wrong for Ramaphosa that now when he takes the podium, people don't get excited? Is it the curse of incumbency that it's 8 years old later?
I think it has a lot to do with the lack of a track record. Promises that he made that is not fulfilled. Inconsistencies that we are picking up. To the extent, to give you one example, I remember when COVID started, he made basically a holy promise to the nation that they will look behind the fees and the way they are going to use it just to end up in another huge corruption scandal. And I think this broke the morale of the people. They believe in the system. And we had the Zuma years with all its challenges. And now the big hope, the Ramaphoria, came to an ending in another way, but in a way also similar to the Zuma era. What we really had hoped for was a period of fundamental change, addressing prominent issues like political stability, like creating an environment for growth, addressing social challenges like poverty, inequality. But at the end of the day, there's strong evidence, looking at the statistics of some indicators, that we are worse off in comparison to 2018 today. And it seems as if this pattern is continuing.
What about recent months? Revelations at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry is an example. Has that made people more despondent in terms of whether the system is working?
Well, yes and no. I think we must recognize the fact that there is a constant soap opera going on. And I had to comment yesterday evening on a television program about what happened yesterday. And it's really a bit of a soap opera. I think today is going to be very interesting with O'Sullivan. But the problem is we had one assassination, one attempted assassination, and after the attempted assassination, a strange killing that may also be an assassination. Now, if you was a witness or a whistleblower, a Balita Diukaran type of person, will you give evidence before the Madlanga Commission? You know, my point of departure, and I discussed that over the past year or two, is that South Africa, and the evidence are academically there, are more and more becoming a mafia state, where criminal groupings aligned with political elites are responsible for decisions and what we call the authoritative allocation of values and scarce resources. That is David Easton's definition for politics. The point I like to make is politics are being taken over by people with criminal and other intent. And that is what the Madlanga Commission is all about. That is what Makwenazi said at his revelations during July last year. So these are very serious. The big question, however, if we look back at the Sereti Commission, if you look at this Morane Commission, that was a commission investigating political assassinations. If you look at the Zondo Commission and you look at the findings of these commissions, what are the outcomes? You know, if you look at the criminal justice system as it stands at the moment, out of every 10 murders, only one is successfully prosecuted. And the indications to me are that the South African political system is falling apart. Therefore, I'm saying we are really at the crossroads. We are at a very difficult point, maybe even more difficult than the period towards the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, where we ended apartheid and we created a new dispensation. The current political environment is more problematic than that time. And you know who are telling me this? Black people that are telling me it was better during that times. And by no means I am supporting the pre-1994 period. But if you look at current socio-economic and political circumstances, you cannot ignore the reality of South African politics as it is. And I think many people are pessimistic.
The GNU, right? 2014, after the elections, we have a government of national unity. The ANC loses its majority. How much of a factor is that in terms of what goes into the State of the Nation of the address? Does it kind of make it easier for Ramaphosa, more difficult? Does it bolster his confidence now that 70% of political representatives are part of his GNU?
Well, I honestly think it is making it more difficult. It is a lot easier if you are the leader of one party where one party achieves a majority. The moment you are using about 10 political parties, which is a form of divide and rule. And the strategy behind this was not to give the DA a too strong position in a government of national unity, to play their influence down. The ANC like to use demographics when they do representation, the representative model. But you will find that the DA, in a way, is underrepresented in terms of the government of national unity. But back to the GNU, if we look at the year and a half plus since the national election, and we ask ourselves, was the government of national unity really an improvement? I think you can argue in some cases there were an improvement. I think there was stronger budget control in some portfolios. There was an improvement of the work done. I think there's a more consensus-orientated approach. But at the same time, there was a lot of conflict. We did not address major issues. And as we enter the State of the Nation address, one of the very prominent issues for the GNU at the moment is the position with regard to international affairs. The ANC is of the view that they have the prerogative on foreign affairs. It's their right to determine international relations. And what we have seen during 2025, and I believe there's a Lekotla planned for later on about foreign policy. It was initiated by the Democratic Alliance. It is clear that within the GNU, there are fundamental differences about international policies. Should we align with the Russias, the Chinas, the Irans, the North Koreas, the Cubas, the Venezuelas of the world, or should we follow a more pro-Western type of approach? And as a result of that, the government of national unity in many ways has become a dysfunctional structure. And I've seen the same pattern when it comes to certain provincial structures, as well as the more or less 70 local structures that is ending up in coalition politics after the 2021 elections. And a lot more is expected after the 2026 local elections.
What's your expectation, Prof? Will it be another kind of standard, run-of-the-mill speech where you got your areas, the usual areas that have to be touched on, safety and security, the economy, electricity, and foreign affairs and the like? Or do you suspect that Ramaphosa understands he needs to make a fundamental change to how he approaches the SONA, even though the structure of the speech may be more or less the same year on year, in order to be able to inspire confidence? Or is he somewhat comfortable knowing that in his final term, and that the GNU is kind of protecting him from detractors within his own party?
Well, the pattern we have seen is a pattern of a small adaptation to business as usual. That is Ramaphosa. He is not rocking the boat or whatever. He is playing it safe all the time, trying to make good promises. But I have the assessment that this time things are going to be more difficult. Things cannot be that easy, and there's a number of reasons for it. In the first place, the international world has changed in a fundamental way. And I'm going to mention a few things. The ANC's strategic partners, from Cuba to Venezuela to Iran to China to Russia, are all in some sort of a crisis. We know what happened in Venezuela. At the moment, Trump is dictating the terms for Cuba, and Cuba's whole regime is in trouble as a result of the lack of Brent crude oil to the Venezuela group sent to Cuba, and Trump has control there. We are at the point, I expect Trump to declare open war on Iran within the next days, maybe a week or so. And this can change Middle East politics in a fundamental way. If you look at China at the moment, China is experiencing major financial and economic challenges. Only yesterday, Xi Jinping phoned Trump in person and invited him to come and visit China during April this year. And the reason is there's a revolt within the Chinese Communist Party, a bit of Praetorian politics. He got rid of the senior people within the military. There was a coup d'etat attempt against Xi Jinping. And now he tried to build legitimacy for his regime and tried to address economic challenges. Russia is in trouble as a result of the Ukrainian war. Where does this left South Africa? In huge trouble. Now we had the fight with the Americans and we had the fight with Trump. And it will be interesting to see, are we going to accept Brent Bozell III? And he's a controversial figure in himself. He's not a traditional conservative in the Republican sense of the word. He's more a right-wing type of politician. So it will be interesting to see the American-South African dynamic. And we know who is the stronger party, and my assessment is South Africa need to adapt to a changing environment. The Americans give us a bit of opening with the AGOA agreement. So that's the one reason. The other one is the GNU. We talk about this. And then the other one is the local government election. So there are a new set of circumstances playing itself out. You need to address that. So it will be status quo, but it's going to be more changes than was the normal case over the past number of years.
What does the tracking look like year on year in terms of what's said and what's promised in the SONA and what's actually delivered? One would assume that they are the experts who actually look at this and track year on year. That are there things on which he actually delivered that can be seen as positives? And where are the things, you mentioned one earlier on, these grand plans and China and the entire city, etc., where things are mentioned in the speech, never to be followed through?
Well, if you assess this, the problem with assessment is, are you using data? Which type of data are you using? Are you selective with data? So immediately you enter a field of academic debate about the merit of a number of things. My criteria I am using in a normative way, as well as the data and figures available, and I am doing research on South African politics literally on a daily basis. I must tell you, if I must look at the outcomes, I would say credit for 1 to 2 out of 10. The rest are problematic in many ways. But now you also must qualify what is the meaning of a problem. I differ fundamentally from the transformation approach. I believe that the transformational approach is at the root of our lack of economic development, lack of growth, patterns of deindustrialization, the whole B model, overregulation of any environment, even stronger control, more grants to more people, a smaller tax base, and all of this. And Mr. Ramaphosa will argue that if he gives more grants to more people, it's a positive. For me, it's a negative, because people are becoming more and more dependent on the state in order to survive. So from one ideological point, we'll identify a win, and another one will be more negative. In that sense, I am more critical. There will be other commentators that will probably giving the president 5 or 6 out of 10. But personally, from my position, I will give him 1 or 2 out of 10.
In terms of tomorrow and what's going to happen at the SONA and how it plays out, I mean, we know the routine, right? The one difference, though, this time is that with the DA, for example, and many of the other parties being part of the GNU, one gets the impression in recent years, since the last election, that they pretty much mild in their critique of the SONA. It's left now primarily to the EFF and to the MK, and the MK seems to be in a bit of an internal disarray because of what's happening within the party. The EFF seems to have lost a bit of its sting in recent years, especially with the departure of Shivambu and now Malema's legal woes. Where does that leave the opposition in the context of how the SONA will be critiqued and assessed?
So, Lema, the question you are asking is an extremely important but also a very interesting question. And that is part of the inner debate within the Democratic Alliance. And that is also part of the downfall of John Steenhuisen. Because the argument is, ironically, that the Freedom Front, Pieter Groenewald, one of my old students, he did his PhD with me, according to perception, he did a fine job with correctional services. And the Freedom Front, to a certain extent, maintain their criticism against the ANC. On the other side, the Democratic Alliance, with a lot more portfolios, 6 or 7 portfolios, I think, their position was more a position of co-option. And I know, and I had conversations with some of the senior leadership of the ANC over the past month or two, they are clearly telling me there are a lot of debate within the DA. Shouldn't it be better to play the role of an official and formal opposition? And my honest take on it is, yes, it will be better, especially under a non-performing government of national unity, or a government of national unity that is not performing to the extent I believe they should perform. But now you must also listen to Helen Zille and others. what are the alternative? The alternative to them, and they have a point there, is that you may end up with a doomsday coalition involving the EFF, involving maybe even MK elements. And you have the type of configuration we have seen in Gauteng. And that is also not an ideal situation. But you are absolutely right. You cannot be part of a government and at the same time play a negative critical role where you are also co-responsible one way or another. And I think the basic problem for specifically the DA is that you cannot have your leader in the party also be a member of a national cabinet. And hopefully, if the DA select a new leader in April, and let's say it's Jordan Hill Lewis or another person, that person is not becoming a cabinet minister. His job should be to drive the party, especially in an election year. And that is why the Freedom Front Plus is doing better. They have their old leader in cabinet, Pieter Groenewald, and the new leader in Corneille Mulder as the party leader. I think that differentiation in this complex environment is a lot better.
Indeed. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for chatting to us. We really appreciate it.
Salem, always nice talking to you, sir, and it was a privilege.
Have a great day and go well.
Thank you, sir.
That was Professor Andre Duvenage from the University of the Northwest out in Potchefstroom. I was there actually in Potchefstroom just yesterday. So yeah, SONA, and let's see how it will play out. I'm hoping that Ramaphosa will pleasantly surprise us. I doubt it though. I'm skeptical in that regard. Nonetheless, we have a duty, as much as we may be somewhat skeptical, disillusioned, despondent, to listen, to hear. He is the president at the end of the day, and then to critique, but to do it from an informed perspective. So, INX will be reporting live from the SONA. I would encourage you to follow the proceedings and to develop and form your own view in terms of how you are going to react to the SONA as a citizen of South Africa. That's it for this week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.